Hello. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Tijuana, Mexico. Yes.
Amazing. Hi, Jasmine. Hi, Haley.
Hi, Jasmine. Doing well. Five Quinta Nada 35. I hope I said that right.
We're going to go ahead and get started in just a couple of minutes. Just waiting people to join. Oh, awesome. That's great.
Oh, that is awesome.
Cool. Welcome. Hey, folks.
Yes.
Thanks for joining us today. We're going to get started in just a few minutes. Can't play music. Otherwise get kicked off. Hey, Sammy.
Right.
That's my cousin.
Oh, hey, fam. Hey, fam.
Hey, Whitney.
Oh, hi, Whitney.
We'll give it a few more. Do you want to let Haley and Jasmine in while we're waiting? Hey, Zoe.
Hi, Haley.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Looking flawless as always.
I do my best for you, Maya.
And you are always successful, I must say. Hair always slayed, skin always glowing. Hi,
Jasmine.
Hey, everybody.
Jasmine, you're famous now for your real.
Hey, Ishara.
Sorry, you have so much community here.
It's like my roommate.
Hi, roommate.
Hi, roommate. Cool. Do we want to wait a couple minutes or do we want to go ahead and get started?
We can get started.
Cool.
It's comfortable.
Is Manny on yet? Maybe. If not, I can just go ahead and kick this off. Cool. Hey everyone, my name is Dara Shaw. I'm the Learning Education Director at Creative Reaction Lab, and I'm here today with Maya Williams, our People and Engagement and Impact Director, and we have Haley and Jasmine, who are our Katherine Dunham Fellows. And so you're joining our conversation today. If you're joining our conversation today, that's because you're interested in what's going on with the Supreme Court and affirmative action. And so today's conversation, we're going to be centering our youth leaders and also our, and Maya, who has experience in higher education, to just talk about what their experiences have been in college admissions process, and also what are some things that people can do. It can feel really stifling when there's a Supreme Court decision. And so I'm actually going to hop off in a second, but I wanted to point you all to a couple of really important resources that we have on our Instagram. So the first one is our multimedia toolkit, which was also curated by Jasmine and Maya and Haley and Emmanuel, who's right here. Hey, Manny. And so Manny will be joining us in just a second. He's a summer associate with us. So they created this amazing multimedia toolkit that if you're just finding out about what happened with affirmative action or unfamiliar with the history, we have curated resources, so articles, podcasts, videos, as well as acts of resistance that are happening kind of all across the country. And many acts of resistance are already happening too. And the second thing I wanted, and so that is in our bio, the link is in our bio, so after I'll hop off, I'll drop the link in the chat. And then the other thing I wanted to let you all know about is our Write for Your Rights campaign. And so these are postcards of artwork that are created by our young Seeds of Power Fellows and Artwork for Equity artists as well. And so you can order some postcards to get to your wherever you are, and we have scripted messages that you can write to your local college admissions folks or whoever you want to write to. regarding the Supreme Court decision. So I'm going to go, but thank you all for joining us today, and I will be in the chat. And Matt, I'll pass it over to you.
All right. Thanks, Dara. I just had you invited Manning. So we'll wait for Emmanuel to come into the space. While we're waiting, I'll just go ahead and reintroduce myself. My name is Maya Williams. I'm the People Engagement and Impact Director at Creative Reaction Lab. I've been working in higher education as a higher ed administrator and instructor for almost 10 years now, working in the behavioral and social sciences, as well as at my time at Georgetown in the Office of Student Equity and Inclusion. And then I will pass it off to Jasmine.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jasmine Lewis. Every time I introduce myself, I like to let people know that I'm a multi-intentional artist, scholar, and humanitarian with a passion for poetry and equity, aka the self-proclaimed poetic warrior. I'm one of the Spring 2023 Katherine Dunham Fellows, and I'm super excited to be having this conversation with y'all, especially as a college student, as I'm entering my senior year, and having been one of the inaugural interns for the University of Alabama's new Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Department. And I'll pass it over to you, Haley.
I'm Haley Jane. I am a recent college graduate from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Such a breath, takes my breath away when I say that. I studied photography as well as graphic design, so I am a multimedia artist, but through the lens of like photo-based artwork and design, and I am the other Katherine Dunham Fellow.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all, for introducing yourselves. We're still waiting for Manny to join, but I wanted to kick us off with this question, and I'll let y'all know that our young leaders at Creative Reaction Lab are the ones that created these questions. Hey, Mia. So the first question is to share one or two feelings or thoughts that you all have around the affirmative action decision.
I remember feeling confused because I was just wondering, like, I feel like SCOTUS makes decisions on what sometimes people call non-issues, and with pairing that with the decision on student loan relief, I was more confused as to why our government would not want to invest in the progression of its own people. And knowing the details of the case, like how this all actually happened so quickly, I was very frustrated and, again, confused.
Yeah, I agree with just being confused but not surprised. And knowing that they would try to justify the decision by saying, well, oh, we need to be colorblind with our processes in college admissions, just like they want to be colorblind with any systemic issue, which won't work because it's very dismissive to the fact that in this world, especially in this nation, we're still pushing for equity. So in an equitable world calls for practicing more different modes of being inclusive. And we shouldn't be colorblind in our college admissions or as a people of this nation and of this world. We should instead be culturally competent. That was like my first thought surrounding it.
Yeah, no, I especially feel the same way as you all. I was very disheartened, very disappointed, but like y'all said, very unsurprised as well. I kind of felt this coming, especially with a lot of the other policies that were going against these human rights, that this one was just on the chopping block as well. And me being so close to DC, and I went to a university that was very much aligned with politics and all the feelings and feeling all those feelings, it was, and working in these programs that were very much centered around ensuring that people who looked like me, BIPOC identifying students, got to come to these universities that have often excluded them from being able to participate. It's just, when I look at them sometimes, I'm like, it's just disappointing. And it's like, what can we do to continue to support them, especially this new wave of youth who are coming into the university setting. But yeah, what do you all, in thinking about some of these things, what are some misconceptions or myths that you all think people have had that are pretty common that happen when we're running into these conversations around affirmative action? And why do you think they seem to dominate the conversation?
I feel that because I feel that the majority of the population feels so unsatisfied with their own access to education, paired with the kind of racism that exists in our country, it's easier to find a sense of power in putting people down. So I feel as if these kinds of those responses as to like, oh, it feels unfair, or they're giving people handouts or things like that, I feel like that is a response to feeling powerless themselves and wanting to gain some of that back by pushing other people down. And in a sense, it's a scapegoat. That's just what I've kind of gathered. But yeah.
I feel like one of the most common misconceptions is that this will, in a way, bridge some form of equality, whatever form of equality that they're assuming that would mean, or assuming who that would benefit, when in actuality it's diminishing a form of equality that's existed within the college's admissions process for decades now. And also, by just eliminating race in admissions, it also makes you think about DEI departments, or makes me think about DEI departments in schools, and also how it connects with that common misconception that diversity, equity, and inclusion is not needed within educational spaces, which is definitely not true. And it just makes me wonder, how will we push forward to accommodate to underrepresented communities if we're pushing back the few pieces of legislation that we have to ensure that these processes are in the least bit equitable?
Exactly. And even while I'm thinking about some of these myths or misconceptions, I think a lot of people forget that affirmative action is not just for education, and it hasn't always just been for people who are of African American descent or BIPOC people. It's also for, oh, sorry about the lighting. It's also been for people who identify as white females, persons with disabilities. Sorry about that. We're going through storms in this area, part of the country, but it's also, no, just saying, reiterating, it's also been for around employment. It's also been, so people don't really think about some of the other things that affirmative action also impacts. And I think back to like the history of affirmative action and when it was first extended to higher education. It actually didn't first start in higher education in the 1960s. It first started in the workspace and employment, ensuring that a particular group of people could work in that space, like women, because we know before that time women weren't allowed to work alongside men, especially in these male-dominated spaces. And then later it becoming more about education when John F. Kennedy got put into office. So I sometimes think about, why do people only focus on the affirmative action around race when it comes to education? And then you think about how powerful education can be for people, and why that's always the first thing that people try to disrupt or interrogate. Because they know the more people are educated, the more they feel empowered to do things and to move forward and push past some of these policies that kind of held us back for a long time. Any other thoughts around that? And sometimes I like to reflect along like intersectionality in these areas, like around race and gender playing a really big role in affirmative action. And then you look at the people who get to make these decisions, and it's not these people who they're often mostly impacted by these challenges. And that's why, like at Creative Reaction Lab, we try to make it our purpose to center those living voices, to center the people that are mostly impacted by this work, and to lean to them around some of the approaches, because they're so close to a lot of these challenges. And for me, that's become my like life's work now, is to make sure that we continue in this fight, to make sure that folks that look like us have a seat at this table too. How do you all think, how could affirmative action have been or can be redesigned to better meet the needs?
I will say, oh, Haley,
Go ahead,
you
Jeff.
can go ahead.
No, you go.
I was just gonna say that I definitely feel like it would be very difficult because each state has different legislation pertaining to how they handle education. But it's really important that if we want to have these admissions processes and just educational experiences for young people in general that accommodate their diverse cultures and experience, then we have to implement it within education systems across the board. Just like affirmative action was originally implemented across the board for all different schools, or at least the majority of schools, colleges, and universities in the US. I feel like we have to have some basis, some founding piece of legislation that will ensure that all schools don't try to create some sort of runaround around being able to admit people who are of different races and differing abilities and different ethnicities and cultures and nationalities. And one of the biggest steps I feel like towards moving to that is having conversations like these, and also just collaborating and community organizing as students. Me as a student, I'm looking right now, searching for ways where I can help my BEI department at the University of Alabama and support them in ensuring that the admissions process stays as equitable as possible, as well as campus grounds. So I just feel like we have to find a sense of solidarity among us so that affirmative action is resonant, meaningful, and impactful.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, especially when it comes to organizing in our communities, because these things have to start locally. I've always said, like, personally, that affirmative action was kind of like a band-aid to the bigger issues that led for the need to affirmative action anyway. And it starts with like completely socializing education as a whole. The education is a human right, and because of that in itself, we have this need for affirmative action, and it was 45 years of precedent that was so easily taken away. I just think it goes to show how like I just think it goes to show how almost like easy it is to for certain groups of people to mobilize, get money together, and get things rolling, and for others. So I think we really have to motivate people in my age group and younger people to have a sense of community and organize and talk to each other. So yeah.
Definitely. So along these lines, in what ways do you all feel affirmative action, while somewhat helpful, still doesn't, oh wait, do we ask this? Yeah, how could it be? Sorry, y'all. My questions are all a little bit jumbled. So the next question is, one of the most important topics that arose in the wake of the Supreme Court decision on affirmative action was around solidarity amongst BIPOC communities. How can we promote unity to ensure equitable access to education amongst the communities? can kick us off with this question since I didn't answer the last one. Sometimes I think about curriculum. Well, I always think about curriculum, um, and why it's so important to include the history of not just white people's history or the darker histories in American history in curriculum, but it's really important to teach the true history of what's happened, and embedding that in our curriculum so that people can learn not just about other people's cultures and history, but learn to appreciate them too. Making sure that we're reflective of all the people that are sitting in the classroom who are learning from one another. I feel like the more we learn about each other, the more we can appreciate each other. The more we appreciate each other, the more respect and love we can show towards each other. And when you love somebody and when you can show love towards people, I feel like that's when you don't want to harm them or create these policies that harm them or these spaces where they feel like they don't belong. So how can we start creating a more inclusive curriculum, not just in higher education, but even in younger years, like in our primary and secondary institutions as well? Because it feels like when we start, the younger that we start, the more we can have better impressions on people to show love towards one another rather than showing hate or competition, which sometimes that feels like living in America feels like you're constantly competing, but not all of us get a fair start, right? So it's like you're always going to win and I'm always going to be behind because I'm struggling to try and keep up with you. And then I also like talking about culture shifts. I know in my time at universities, we're constantly trying to do these evaluations of the culture at the university, and the data always says the same thing. It always says that the people who identify as BIPOC or women always have the same exact experiences, and they're pretty consistent, or people of a particular, like our LGBTQ populations always share the same sentiments of their experiences at the university. And it's that we don't feel like we belong. We feel like we're in the classroom. The teacher's always, of a particular background, and they have certain expectations. And I just can't live up to those expectations they have of me because I'm already struggling in the background. Just to get here, the scholarships, just to get here was a lot of work. And now I'm here and I don't have the support that I need, like support services. Not every campus has like an office that supports people of a particular background. So you're struggling trying to find your community. You're struggling trying to figure out how can I financially support myself. You're struggling with, the people in my classroom, the people that I live with don't look like me. We don't share the same experiences. Where can I find my people? So it's like we need to shift that culture and we need to figure out what that can look like for every institution. And then maybe people will feel more supported while they're in those spaces. And then I always lastly, I'll round this off and then pass it along is funding is put your money where your mouth is. We always like to invest in like the business schools because they bring us money back. And I'm just like, I remember when my sister was at University of Maryland, her when she was there, her class was they said that class was the most talented and skilled class. And that was because they intentionally did outreach to schools that were in inner cities of Baltimore, and they were finding students who were we were finding Black students, students from Latinx backgrounds who were very, very talented. They didn't know the University of Maryland was a school that was for them. So they did very intentional outreach to those populations, got them in, and then that class was the most talented class, that the highest GPA of any other class that they had at that institution up until that time. And they were like, well, this speaks to a lot of what we're saying now, is that why diversity is so important in higher education, and why we need diverse thinkers to be in the space so that we can get our society to where we need it to be.
To add on to that, sorry, Jessica.
You're good.
I've always thought about, like, because I went to a predominantly white like institution, I remember feeling okay, where are all the black people? Where do they hang out? You know, I remember feeling that, but also I was in art school at the university, so it had a different culture in and of itself. But I still remember thinking like every like group has its own like cultural center, which is really awesome, but it still felt very segregated between groups of people. And and our design, it didn't feel that way, but I noticed on every other part of campus it was like that. So I think especially having the kind of classes, the kind of courses that encourage people to learn things that are outside of their own backgrounds is super important. Especially when I think about if I want to learn something particular about archaeology, but something that's not completely classics, you know, that could be something that's like pretty difficult. And the way that people talk about indigenous groups like just goes to show like the kind of education that's offered on certain subjects, you miss out on a lot on the rest of the world. And I think that would be um, that should be something that's definitely funded, like you said, Maya. And I think there are definitely avenues for students to promote that and engage in that themselves as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I've been an advocate of just changing school systems just locally where I was in Tuscaloosa County school system, shifting our educational curriculum, like our core curriculum, to being more culturally competent since I was like probably 15 or 16, because I remember we had to do this activity where we wrote to the Department of Education or a local education representative that actually creates legislation, or a educational board member, saying what we wanted to shift within our educational experiences and what we wanted to learn, the type of topics that we want to be introduced to as students. And I just remember me and my friends being like, I just wish we had, of course, more than just on the intercom every morning a Black History quote for Black History Month, actually learning and going in depth into Black history. And also, not only that, but celebrating months of heritages across the board and cultures across the board, because one of the only ways where we can become culturally competent and knowledgeable about different people's experiences is to learn from them. So I feel like if we would have some sort of educational program, whether it be monthly or like incorporated into the core curriculum, like reading, writing, math, science, history, plus cultural competency would be would be the key. It should be it by now. It literally should be one of the standards of our educational experiences, at least here in the U.S., um, really worldwide. And I feel like if students like me were feeling like that around like 2017, 2018, 2019, of course, students now are feeling that same sort of emotion, if not even stronger, that are like, why are we not able to control our educational experience or have autonomy within our own educational experiences? And why are we still learning the exact same curriculum plans that were crafted in like the late 1800s, early 1900s? So I
Mm-hmm.
definitely agree that there needs to be a shift in grade school curriculum in general, and also amplifying student voices. We need more student boards, student involvement. I can't speak for all schools, but I know in my experiences throughout school, there were many opportunities for students to have their voices heard by faculty and administration. So I feel like that it definitely starts with them, because they will be the trailblazers and the cultural bearers of the future. So we have to allow them to have a voice within their educational experience that literally builds their backbone into how they're going to enter, experience, and exist within this world.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, Jasmine. I totally agree. How, since you all are coming from these student perspectives, I wonder how you all feel, other ways you feel that students can work alongside their school administrators in our DEI departments to make inclusive and safe spaces for BIPOC communities on campus?
Yeah, I can start. Since I was one of the DEI interns, literally winter of last year, it's been a whole year now. I was able to firsthand experience the behind the scenes of a diversity, equity, and inclusion department of a school. And specifically at my school, they had formed it years in advance, but they were just now trying to implement policy in 2022, which was very surprising to me. But it also gave us the interns an opportunity to help build the basis of the program and to just imagine and brainstorm different ways for students of the future and for us as current students to have a say-so within our educational experiences, on-campus experiences, and the communities that we find, nurture, and become a part of during our time in academia. And one of the most, I think, memorable things that I learned from that was when the VP was telling me, like, hey, this is our first time implementing any policy, and there's only, I think it was like three or four of us on this board as administrators, and there's literally no one to help us. There's no funding, so we're doing this all by ourselves from the ground up. And I feel like in that way, I felt even more called to try to collaborate with the DI department at my school and just helping them craft and build the blueprint of what they want their school's basis of equity to be, or what the University of Alabama's devotion, dedication, and demonstrations of commitment to equity would be. And I would also say you can't just talk about it, you got to be about it. And that's on both the students and educational specialists, faculty, administrators' part. In order to build the educational experience that we each deserve, we have to work together to do it, and we have to be willing to put the work in. We have to be willing to be receptive to differing ideas. And we also have to, like I mentioned with the other question, we have to be willing to amplify student voices and put them at the forefront of how we make change within our school systems.
All right, so I'll move to this next question. It's how can we start taking action to make the admissions process and overall college experience more equitable? That's a big question. Anybody from our audience have any ideas too? We want to make sure we're opening it up to our community as well. I see, Manny, you wrote one of the ongoing efforts at the University of Chicago is a joint campaign between several Black student orgs on campus pushing for a community center for Black students. Yes. Any other thoughts around this? I'd say with admissions, my experience with it has been interesting. I know in my time at the universities I worked at, we looked at trying to create the common app accessible to our institution. At first, it was only our own specific app that we used. And of course, there was the high fee. Only certain people could get it waived. We talked about the issue around certain students who, although they might have identified as BIPOC, they were right at that number where their parents were just over what was considered consider like where they could afford the university or not. And they didn't take into consideration expenses, other children that lived in that household, other things that they had to take care of. So if your parent made maybe 75,000 a year, they were like, okay, we're not going to offer you any other assistance when it comes to admissions process. We're not going to waive your fee because your parents make just too much. And when you think about $75,000 a year, even for a single parent home, that still doesn't take care of all the necessities on top of these universities where the cost to go there increases every single year, like clockwork. So we were looking at why don't we take a look at that number and push it up more, taking into consideration that the cost of living goes up every year. And these days, people aren't getting paid more, although the cost of living goes up. So looking at ways in detail like that, and then looking at a more holistic approach to the admissions process, not just relying on race, but relying on what is the student's full experiences and how can we capture that within that admissions process? How can we learn holistically about the student and who they are and why they'd be a good fit for this university? And I think it also requires you to redefine what is a good fit for our university. What kind of students do we want to graduate and then move into the world where they're trying to make changes in our society? Any thoughts y'all are having?
I would say just I feel like now with this decision, the essay space is going to be more important now, like now more than ever, and finding ways to basically talk about who you are and the whole self. And the essay space is such an amazing way to do that. But also, I'm thinking I had to apply to art school, so I also had a portfolio. I feel like those admissions people got to know me in a different way than other admissions folks in other colleges on the university. So I think it could be interesting to open up other mediums of whatever, like I don't know, like video introductions to people, or anything, things like that. Besides the standard, what are your test scores, your extracurriculars? Were you a leader in that extracurricular? Like all these little things that I remember feeling in high school that I just never did enough, you know? But because I was an artist and all I had to do was show them the things I did outside of school all the time anyway, that really benefited my position a lot. And I feel like that could benefit other people who aren't even artists but have, there are other ways that people can communicate who they are that is outside of the standard of what applications look like now. And also, I applied to I don't know how many schools, and I had to pay an admissions fee for every single one of them. So maybe doing something, I don't know what the point of the admissions fee for, but maybe it's super important. They absolutely need it, but I don't know. But that also in and of itself is a barrier for some people where they feel like they have a limit on how many schools they can apply for, things like that.
Yeah, no, I hear that. And I'll say for students, the whole process of just getting into the university setting is challenging enough. But one thing I did appreciate about what students did to create equity for themselves from some of the institutions I worked at was that they would advocate together. It was something very interesting about some of this collectivist organizing and saying, well, let's think about this. We're the ones that pay the most to come to this university. We're here to basically provide you all with work. I wouldn't have a job if students didn't go to the school and didn't apply to the university. I would be out of a job. So they collectively knew this, and they're like, who really has the power? Is it the administrators? Is it the board? Or is it us together saying we're not going to put up with some of these inequities that you are creating at this institution? And I think now would be the time for people to stand up again and look at what allyship looks like and look at what designing together looks like. How can we reimagine what the admissions process looks like on campuses, or reimagining what education looks like. We often think about traditional education and how just sitting in a classroom seems to be the only way that we think about educating ourselves in a formal way that gets us to that job or that career trajectory. But things are shifting now that we're becoming more of a global world. We're more technology savvy. We're more on the internet and remote. And so there are new ways where we can educate ourselves. I was just talking to somebody recently about how I spend most of my free time on YouTube, just picking up just educating myself in that way and finding other ways I don't want to have to go back to school and pay for all these things and go through that process of admissions. So what does it look like if we all redesign what typical traditional education looks like? And then that might push people to change too, because now it's like, we're no longer putting our money in these traditional higher ed spaces that don't want us here anyways. What would it look like if we took our money out of these spaces and create our new way of thinking about education or educating ourselves, and looking at the fact that I think most of the jobs I've applied for in my time don't really look at my degree or don't really ask me to show proof that my degree exists. It's that my experiences matter most, because that's what shines through when I show you the skill set that I have gained through lived experiences, through knowledge I've gained through my own personal learning on my own, not having to be confined to what books were selected for me to read and to learn about in those traditional spaces. Any thoughts from y'all? Jasmine, are you muted? I can't hear you. Haley, can you hear Jasmine?
No, I was trying to make sure my AirPods like didn't break or something.
Oh no, okay. We'll give you a second, Jasmine. It seems like there's like a global, like they're all around the US. The rain is impacting. You saw my lights flicker. It's real life out here, y'all. I see what you wrote. Manny wrote, I think one way to make admissions more equitable is to change how we approach testing, offering resources to help standardize testing or altering requirements that could help. Yeah, I love that, because I remember I was not the best test taker, but when I was living in Texas, all they did was standardized testing. But you could put me in front of a room, or you could make me write a paper, and I would do well. It was just when it came to testing, my nerves, I would get so anxious and I'd be like, I can't do this. So I had to do a lot of work on myself and try to make sure that I can like pass these tests so I could get into the university setting. So that, yeah, that's definitely a thought to rethink about how we administer tests, the questions that we're asking on these tests, and why a test? Why does it have to be a test?
Especially if you are looking to study something specific, where that standardized testing doesn't really doesn't really have a relationship with what you are interested in. I remember thinking, oh, I'm definitely going to go to art school, and yeah, I'll do the SAT because I have to, but that's not what they're going to be interested in. And I think there are definitely other ways you could bring people into a university without a one size fits all kind of thing.
Can y'all hear me now?
Yes, welcome back.
Okay. Sorry about that. Ever since I think a moderator was added to the chat, like I couldn't see the bottom half of my screen, but I was like, maybe I shouldn't close it out.
You're good. You're good.
But I was just basically saying that I was definitely in agreement with both of you, thinking about how education as a whole should be holistic, because we're literally entire human beings with so many different parts of ourselves, and it's very limiting to have to just put that down in 500 words and 2 or 3 test scores. So I definitely feel like there needs to be reform in not only that part of the admissions process, but also just thinking about the way that we're trained within academia to think about certain um, issues and solutions. Is just one, there's only one typical solution for this problem, or there's only one way that we can solve this specific thing. Or a lot of times students are, in a way, I guess you'd say, like, discouraged from
Mm-hmm.
asking questions or questioning authority in a way, questioning educators on their experience and why classes are run the way they are, or why the admissions process is run the way it is. So I wholeheartedly agree that there has to be more accommodations to the students in that way. And also, just making it more holistic would open up so many more opportunities for people who have differing abilities, for people who come from different backgrounds that are not able to, explain themselves beyond a test score in an essay, um, and would appreciate, like you were saying, Haley, doing a video, or they'd appreciate sharing some form of art to showcase creativity, because we as human beings are also naturally creative in our own different, unique ways. So, yeah, education should be a lot more
Mm-hmm.
human centered and
Mm-hmm.
human based, and also centered in our creativity.
I love that. Exactly. So, in thinking along these lines, what do you all feel is most important for student organizers to keep in mind and or practice during these times?
I would probably say, first, to keep front of mind the purpose of why they're pushing towards equitable education. They're both their own unique individual purpose and mission of why they're pushing for it. Maybe it's just because they deserve better, because they do, or it's because they want to make sure, like in my case, that their younger sibling, my little sister, has a meaningful educational experience, especially during
Mm-hmm.
a time where we're seeing so many elements of education being stripped from schools, from book bans to taking out um, arts opportunities in classes, also limiting the students' ability towards freedom of speech and self-expression. So I really feel like we should keep in mind the big picture of why we're pushing towards equity in education, and how each little piece affects one another to build this big mural of education that we, or the state of education that we know of today. And keep in mind that we're all imagining this. This system that we're living in right now was literally imagined by some people centuries ago, which is why it's super outdated. And people have all of these different all of these different talents and thoughts and dreams and experiences that they're able to support a new system and a new idea of education that's never been seen before.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to be able to embrace the diversity of our humanity instead of so many people wanting to put a limit on it and put a barricade against it.
Yes, 1,000%. And we have Manny who chimed in the chat. One thing I think back to during my time with the admissions process was an after school event for learning how to navigate applications. Making information accessible is a huge part of equity. Yeah, definitely, 1,000%. Any comments that you have, Haley, about this student organizers keeping in mind what to keep in mind and or practice during these times?
Sure. I think that it's very easy to get distracted by optics and want to kind of, or let me backtrack. I would say I would try to collect the people who know that agree with you, that they want more, but they just haven't done anything about it. Go to the people who are always posting about things, but have not actually um, gone to any meetings. Have not actually written in. I think finding people who are just as frustrated as you, um, and grabbing those people and really keep growing that, is super important. And I think it's very easy to get distracted by, like I said earlier, the optics of people who you don't think are aligned with you based on like how they look. But I also think it's just as important to talk to people who may not agree with you 100%. I think it's just as important to broaden your horizon of people, because this affects everybody at the end of the day. Some people are way more vulnerable than others, but at the end of the day, this affirmative action decision will impact the entire country and people outside of the country as well. And I think that people should open the doors to those who they are usually like, oh, that person, they're not going to think what I think just based on how you think they look or speak or etc.
Definitely. And I think my comment might be to think about those who paved the way before you and made it possible for you to be here too. And to find, just like you were saying, find people, like-minded people who want to push for the same thing. And I think it's a part of, it will be pushing the admissions officers, pushing your university to acknowledge that this was unconstitutional and that they need to be working with students to redesign what this process looks like so that we can continue to make sure that these university settings are equitable, and that students who are here feel like they belong as well. I wanted to share maybe one last question with this group is maybe one or two words of how you're feeling right now and feeling for the future of this work.
I would go with two I's, two words to start with the letter I: imaginative and ignited.
Focused and motivated.
Yes. And I will say optimistic, and yeah, I'll say optimistic and motivated, definitely. Thank you. Hi, Dar, welcome back. Thank you all for being in this space with us. I'm going to pass it back to Dar, and she's going to close us out for this event. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks all. Amazing that you wrote hopeful and inspired. That's amazing. So for those of you that are sticking around and wondering what you can do, weren't here at the beginning. We have two resources for folks. The first one is a multimedia toolkit that our fellows and associates had put together, and Maya had put together, that basically kind of goes through the history of affirmative action, what different resources are out there, and also ways that people are actively resisting. So I think that's always important to acknowledge. Like at the same time, the feelings of frustration and being stuck exist, and people are resisting in very creative ways, and ways that were listed here too. And hi, Via. And so I wanted to just highlight that multimedia toolkit. It's in the link in our bio. And also within that link in the multimedia toolkit as our Rights for Rights campaign information, there's also a post that we made today about it that essentially gives people canned letters or scripts that they can send to elected officials or their own college admissions department to urge them to be creative or reconsider how they're approaching their admissions process related to the Supreme Court decision. So we'll have both resources, scripts for what you can write to people, and then on top of that, you'll be able to get postcards delivered to your house that you can then write and do a letter writing campaign too if you wanted to do something like that. So thank you all for joining us today. Thank you, Maya. Thank you, Jasmine. Thank you, Haley. Thank you, Manny, for all of your work. And Manny, sorry the tech issues were not in our favor today, but we appreciate your contributions in the chat. And I do want to highlight just one more resource. If you are a young person who is looking for tools or feeling particularly motivated to do something in your own community, but you're kind of lacking resources or mentorship or anything like that, our Seeds of Power Fellowship Program application has just opened. And so the Seeds of Power application program, or fellowship program, is a multi-month program with Creative Reaction Lab where you'll go through our curriculum and work on a community project with lots of support from the organization, and it's paid. So that is really nice to have a fellowship program paid. And so if you're within the ages of 18 to 26, I encourage you to apply. The link to the application is also in the bio. It's also on our website, and you can also DM us at Creative Reaction Lab if you have any questions. I think that's it. Applications close September 15th. If you have any questions, let us know. We'll be posting more information here as well. Thank you all so much.
Thanks, y'all. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.